let's talk about racism. If you guys haven't seen Victor, Gimmeaflakeman, he made a video where he discussed, well, briefly about my situation with my apartment hunting. He didn't really mention any of my details, but the main focus of his video is, are old people in Japan racist? And are they racist because of sentiments lingering from World War II? Now, I'm not going to get into that thing. You guys can watch that video. I'll link that down below in the description because it's a really good video, a really good discussion. But I want to discuss something that I've already discussed in this video here, part of the Bermuda Triangle for foreigners, as I call it, and that's apartment hunting for foreigners. Some of you may be aware I am moving from my current apartment right now. I am looking for a new place that's cheaper and in a different neighborhood. And I found a couple of good spots, but getting to the point where I'm actually having options to choose from was very difficult. And I found one that I really liked. It was really wide, it was beautiful, in a great location. And the most important thing about that was when I was talking with the realtor about the place that I was going to potentially move into was Gaikoku Sodan, which means provisions made for the allowance of foreigners to live in that apartment, or even assistance in moving in and stuff like that, right? So basically, if this apartment has Gaikoku Sodan, then it's very easy for foreigners to move in there, right? A lot of you guys might be aware of this, but Japan isn't necessarily on board with the whole anti-discrimination measures, equal housing laws that America has. And as a libertarian, I'm stepping away from my own libertarian belief and saying that Japan probably needs to set those rules, because the reasons that Japan gives for these laws are quite ridiculous, or rules rather, are quite ridiculous and racist. If you want to go with there, yeah, pretty racist. Let me tell you the story about the current place I'm living in, because I saw a comment on Victor's video where he said that why isn't Zach doing this, that, why doesn't he cut his hair? Has nothing to do with it. Here's what happened, okay? I've gone through like 8 realtors already. Most of them were pretty mediocre. There's 2 or 3 that have been really helpful, but the rest have been just absolute shit. This one realtor though, he's been really friendly, really helpful. He can't speak a lick of English though, so everything is completely in Japanese, which is fine. My Japanese has actually gotten better from this whole ordeal. He was making sure with a lot of the kanri gaisha, which is the management companies that run the apartments on the behalf of the oya-san, or the landlords, right? So he made sure that a lot of the apartments that I was looking at were Gaikoku Sodan, right? So we found a number that were Gaikoku Sodan, but most of the ones that we saw, this was last week on Monday, a lot of them were old, run down, and very shitty neighborhoods. One of them was built in 1964, and there was like rusty, like there was a hole in the ceiling. I'm like, why did you show me this? But the one that he showed me was built like 10 years ago in a great spot. It was like right on Yamate Dori. It was beautiful. It was really open, really wide. And the realtor called the management company, and the management company was Gaikoku Sodan, but not the landlord. So what happened was, I really liked it. The kanri gaisha was really friendly, they were very helpful. But I wanted to keep an open mind, so we looked at the other units, the ones that were totally shitty, like the one with the hole in the ceiling and whatnot. I decided in the end, I was like, okay, this apartment, yeah, by far, this is the best thing I've seen so far, so I want to roll with it. So the realtor calls up the kanri gaisha, and like I said, kanri gaisha management company, right? Kanri gaisha says, okay, we need to call the landlord and make sure everything is okay. So I was like, alrighty. About 20 minutes pass, we get a call from the kanri gaisha. They tell us to come to their office, which is nearby that apartment we're looking at. So we go in there, and they said that the landlord's son picked up the phone saying the landlord wasn't there that day, and that the landlord's son was concerned about the feelings of the landlord because that apartment never had a foreigner living there. Naturally, because of that, the kanri gaisha and my realtor were very concerned that I wasn't able to get the apartment. So what happened was the kanri gaisha drove up, they drew up this entire character outline of myself, right? They classified me as someone who's quiet, hardworking. I don't spend much time at my house. I go outside a lot, so I don't bring noisy people back to my apartment. Not once did they mention I play guitar, so they didn't say anything about what would be noisy about me being in that apartment, right? They said that they saw my YouTube channel, that they like what I do on YouTube. They saw the trash videos, so they know that that they know I've lived here for a long time. I know the rules, I follow the rules. My Japanese is good enough to communicate. They drew up this glowing report, which I read through, and then I signed. And then they handed it to the realtor to sign, and then they handed it to the landlord. I didn't meet the landlord. They handed it to the landlord the next day because they were not, congregation and realtor companies are usually off on Wednesdays. So I couldn't really meet with them on Wednesday. So on Friday I got a phone call from my realtor saying that the landlord didn't want any foreigners living there at all. Period. Flat out Japanese only is what the realtor told me. So that realtor has been struggling to find another place for me that would allow foreigners in the neighborhood that I want to live in because Japan's equal housing laws are just non-existent, right? So I've done a little bit of research and I was considering filing a lawsuit to see if that would do anything. But because Japan doesn't have these equal housing laws or any protections for foreigners in general, this lawsuit would just immediately get thrown out. It would be a waste of time and money, really. Mostly a waste of money. So what happened was I went to a different realtor. We found a couple good places yesterday, but they were considerably smaller than the one I was looking at on Monday that I really liked. But I'm considering making that sacrifice because it's in a nicer location than the one I saw on Monday. Even though the one on Monday was in a great location, the one I saw on yesterday was really, really nice and I liked it a lot. But this is the thing, like, Japan needs to have these rules implemented because it's just flat out racism. I have the money, I showed them, my bank rolls, I showed how much money this company here and my part-time job gives me every month. I am more than capable of paying rent for anything, really. But it's just, there's really no other way I can put it. Besides the fact that it's just pure racism. But it's not really the racism you would think of as like, oh, get these foreigners out of my country racism, right? It's not the Trump racism. I think it's an inherent xenophobia with older Japanese. Like the non-globalized Japanese are more likely to have this sort of xenophobia. And it's not because of World War II. I think it's just Japanese people have been instilled with this idea. Well, older Japanese people, I should say. Not all have this idea because many are very globalized themselves. But I feel like there's this inherent gag reflex on anything foreign. And for the longest time, like especially like if you look at the history of Yokohama, foreigners mostly lived in one area, the Yamate area over that way, and obviously Chukagai over that way, right? So there's been a lot of inherent segregation in Japan. The foreigners lived over here, the Japanese live over here, right? And that's the reason why I think older Japanese people feel that they can just say no Japanese, right? And of course it is partially our fault too that, some of our predecessors and even people who do come to Japan from abroad today are noisy, they cause trouble. The military does nothing to, especially American military personnel stationed in Japan, they do nothing to sort of allay these stereotypes that Americans are loud and obnoxious and brash, right? I had a conversation with my realtor. He said that most Americans these days are really, really quiet and respectful of Japanese rules, but today realtors do not want to deal with Chinese people. And because Chinese people are foreigners, and because Chinese people have this reputation of being noisy, rude, brash, arrogant here in Japan, that is also the reason why many landlords don't want to rent to foreigners in general. Because if they rent to a white guy, if a Chinese person tries to rent in the same apartment, that landlord says, oh, I'm gonna have to rent to this loud, annoying Chinese person too. So that seems to be the underlying sentiment, right? I can understand it because I've met the loud, annoying American foreigner, the loud, annoying Chinese foreigner, loud, annoying German, French foreigner, right? I've met all these people. It's a tiny fraction of the foreigners who live in Japan, right? And I can understand why you would have this reflex, right? But it kind of screws over the long-term residents like myself. Like, I'm not a military personnel. I've been here for 4 years. I intend on living here as long as I can. It screws people over like me, and I feel like that these protections are going to have to be in place. And if I was a landlord, I'd be like, okay, I understand the reflex action because I don't want to deal with loud, annoying people, right? I mean, I've had, ever since my apartment building, most of the units in my current apartment building turned into an Airbnb. I've had to deal with the loud, annoying tourists all the time, and most of them are from East Asia. Very few tourists that do come and stay at the Airbnbs in my apartment building that I live in right now are from the West. There's been so much trouble in the last 3 years due to trash not being cleaned up, noise in the hallways, elevators breaking because of overload of luggage. That's an Airbnb thing. That's not necessarily the long-term residence thing, right? Tourists tend to be more disrespectful of the culture, I think, than long-term residents do. So I do think that Japan needs these equal housing protections put in. But at the same time, I totally understand why the landlords have this, like, wretch to them, like, oh, foreigners, man, why do I want foreigners living here? I don't know. Anyway, that's my rant. This is my take on the whole issue. Hopefully my apartment hunt will be over soon. But thank you guys for watching. Leave a like, please. I'm being like-botted or dislike-botted right now. Like, I've noticed, like, every night around 4 o'clock, the day that I upload a video, so I upload videos usually 9 or 10 at night. Every night that, following 4 a.m., I get a bunch of dislikes. So hit that like button before all the dislike bots come in. Anyway, thanks for watching. See you guys later. Take it easy.